Yeah, I want you to ask yourself the question, what are you putting off right now? What's that big project, unmade decision, thing that's vaguely at the end of your consciousness that you kind of know you need to figure out, that you know that you need to get answered, but that you are putting off right now? And I'm going to give you 1 or 2 minutes to do that, because it'll actually make what we go into today so much more productive for you. Okay, yep, so here's some of the things that I'm starting to hear. So creating more ambitious goals for your artwork. Yeah, both making that artwork and marketing it. Yeah, amazing thing to start to think about. Doing an artist fellowship or residency, right? So, maybe you've had in the back of your mind, this is what I want to do, and I have this goal, and I've been thinking about it for a while, but you can't just put on your to-do list, do an artist residency, right? Because you got to figure out, well, where would I look? And there's all these steps to it. You got to think through, do I have the time to take off, right? There's all these pieces to that component, right? Making your art business into something else. Yeah, take another 30 seconds. What is this for you today, right now? So the reason that I created this strategy is because the women who I work with, turns out, needed it. And I want to tell the story of a woman who I worked with who really needed this, and then share a little bit of why this strategy is so powerful, especially for folks who have creative backgrounds. And then we're going to do a pretty fun exercise, and we're going to help you think through, we're going to help you get started making that decision, or at least, thinking through the thing that you need to think through, and kind of starting the process for yourself. So the thing that you're putting off, you're not going to put off anymore. What I want to say also is that what we're going to do here today is also something that you can do for yourself again and again and again and again, right? Once you have this down, the strategy is there for you whenever you want it and need it. And sometimes you have to remember to take it off the shelf and to use it. But once you get in the habit of doing it, it will help you get through so many things. It'll help you figure out so many things. So, all right, here's why I developed this strategy. I had a woman who I was working with in my next level coaching program, which is a coaching program for mid-career women. We help them define career directions and then turn those career directions into a roadmap and an action plan. And so it's really, in some ways it's a version of this question, if you've been putting something off. One of the biggest things I hear from women, especially if they're in a field after they've gotten their license, is like, where do I go from here? I don't know. And I don't even know how to start figuring out where I'm going to go. And so what happened for this woman is we'd gotten clear on her North Star. We had a roadmap and action plan. We were getting traction. It involved growing in her company. And one of the things, a really, really exciting thing happened for her. She got asked to apply for a role that was on the way to her North Star. It was 1 or 2 notches below the North Star role she'd set for herself. And she got asked to write her own job description. So on one hand, this should be really exciting. It's like, yeah, what the energy you're putting out there is coming back to you. People are saying like, yes, we see you on this path too. Hey, write your job description, right? Write your job description on one hand is like, this is awesome. Like, if I was the decider, as George Bush would say, here's how I'm going to make it work, right? Like in the little kid in me is like, in my job as XYZ, I will establish international eat ice cream for breakfast day that we will celebrate in the office. And we're going to do this. It's like, it could be incredibly exciting, even if you're not being a ridiculous person like I just was. But because you get to say, oh, what do I think this job should be? How do I say what the qualifications and the outcomes and the responsibilities should be based on what my strengths are, right? It's an incredible, incredible opportunity. But, and you might be thinking this yourself, right? You might have had this response. The way this woman experienced it wasn't with that sense of excitement. It was with the sense of overwhelm and maybe even a little bit of dread, right? Here she was, someone was like, write a job description. And she was like, like, how do I get started, right? You know, fear of the blank page. And so that fear of the blank page, when we are creatives, when we're designers, when we're, you know, creatively minded problem solving people, that fear shows up for us in our work itself, right? You know, maybe think back to when you were first a baby engineer and you got your first problem, right? And you were trying to think through, well, you know, and it wasn't just about, you know, putting something in a formula and popping out the answer. You're like, well, how do I get started on this? Or, you know, for me, when I think about my journey as eventually getting my landscape architecture degree, those first few projects that I did in school were so frightening because there were so many possibilities and then almost no possibilities. I didn't know where to start, and it was so overwhelming. And so what I have learned to do over the course of the years is to take what I learned in that moment of, you know, creative paralysis and how I learned to kind of work through it and to use it to help me when I need to make a decision or craft something and move forward, right? For me, I do it when I'm writing blog posts. I do it when I'm crafting a strategy for the next quarter. I do it when I'm, you know, I wish if you guys could see the wall behind me because it's like covered in Post-it notes with a couple of the problems that I'm currently working through. So one is, you know, a conference submission that I'm submitting to a national conference, and another is a process that I know that I need to create for an assistant of mine. The third is, you know, a sales page, right? So it's all up in my wall. So what we did for this woman is we took that process that I've been using and we used it to take that fear of the blank page and actually carve it up into a simple strategy that involves brainstorming, kind of, you know, no requirement to get it totally right on your first time brainstorming, and then a process of editing. And, you know, in some ways, and I'm going to be walking you through this strategy, what I love about this strategy is you never quite sit down to write or to craft or to decide or to make your goals or to, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You sit down to answer to brainstorm on specific questions, and then you collect and organize the answers, and they turn into a draft, because a lot of us struggle to make something new, but it's easy for us to edit something. You know, I don't know if you ever had that issue if you were in, you know, college or high school or writing papers, and, you know, they were like, use the outline method, and you're like, I don't know how to get started. And once you got started, right, once you had a draft of that paper, then you could be in editing mode, you could be in improvement mode, right? And so this strategy that I'm going to teach today, and that you're actually going to get to see live demonstrated, and I cannot wait for that, it helps you avoid ever having to create something, although you're totally creating something, and it gets you into editing mode pretty quickly. Now, one of the other things I want to share before we dive into using the strategy is that one of the biggest things holding women who I work with back is that they're really busy, right? There's a project deadline, and then there's another one 2 weeks from now, and then, you know, like you felt like you had a week free, and then, you know, your kid gets the flu, and then the flu runs through the entire family, and it's like, you know, it's like you can't get time to pull out of the day-to-day and to really think about where you want to go, or to think through what kind of residency would I want, or what would it mean to take my business to the next level, or, you know, what is that next career goal? And because our inner critic is kind of in there saying, like, it's got to be perfect, that job description has to be perfect, everyone's going to be judging you, or it feels big and complex, our inner critics tell us that sitting down to do that work is going to take a really long time. So we're like, okay, I cleared out the morning, and I really need a clean desk. I'm going to clean my desk so I have a clean mind. Oh, you know what? I just got to get those 3 emails off so I have a clear mind so I can really dive into it. And we kind of over prepare ourselves to get the work done and, you know, build it up. And then we also carve out this time on the calendar. And a lot of the time we actually didn't need that much time. You know, we know a lot of what we needed to know moving forward before we started. So part of how you can kind of stick it to that inner critic, and this is what we're going to practice today, is by not leaving yourself these massive chunks of time to, like, you know, wax poetic on exactly what it is that you're trying to figure out, but to actually bound that time and to have that be part of the process. So if you haven't figured out what the question that you're putting off is, take a minute to think about that to yourself, because we're going to workshop you. And you're also going to get a chance to see me workshop another woman. But in the meantime, one thing that I do want to share is that if the thing you're working on is career or business direction, if you know that, especially like I mentioned, you've gotten your license, you're mid-career, you're hitting a point where you've been climbing that ladder and it's like, get those hours in, get that license, get that experience, get that title, whatever it is. And you're reaching up and there's no wrong because you actually have to figure out where you ultimately want to go, right? You have to figure out what to do when someone asks you, what is your 5-year plan, instead of just, hiding under the table. I would love to invite you to have a free consultation with me on my Next Level program, which is a 4-month coaching program where we help you get really clear on what your career direction is and then help you translate that into an action plan. And we spend the last 2 months implementing the action plan so you can learn through doing versus just learn through thinking. So if you're interested, you can book a free 30-minute consultation with me. You can do it at the link calendly.com/Maya Sharfy, Maya-Sharfy /next-level-program-consultation. And I actually have a little special bonus offer that I'll share with you towards the back end of this call if you're interested. Okay. So, and I'll also put that in the chat box so you have it right at your fingertips. So we are going to go through this example now with a awesome volunteer, who is Victoria Plunky, who works at Stantec, a large AEC company, and Victoria has brought her challenge that she's trying to figure out. So what I want you to do is I want you to learn from Victoria's situation, but then I also want you to be thinking about your own situation and even go through with us and respond to the prompts that I'm going to give Victoria and apply them to what you're going through. So Victoria, you want to come on and say hello and talk about and explain your problem that we're going to be working on for you?
Sure. Hi, Maya. Hi, everyone on the call. Thanks for inviting me to the workshop. So my challenge that I had been putting off, this task that I'd been putting off for a while, is coming up with a list of career goals, like coming up with my career plan for the next year, 5 years, 10 years. It's something that we routinely do within our company on a semi-yearly basis. And my next review is coming up soon, so I need to start compiling this list of career goals and form up this plan. And I'm at a point in my career that Maya was talking about. I got my PE license a couple of years ago, and now I'm kind of at a point where I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to be doing for the next 5 years. So that's what I'm going to be working on today.
Great. And so one thing I'll say is that we're going to work on a kind of mini version of this challenge, because I feel like figuring out what your career goals are for you could actually probably use this strategy to figure those out, or at least to get the initial stance. But what we're going to do with Victoria is we're going to help her think through her approach to her next review. How does she prepare for her review? So some of that will include career goals and some of that will include other elements of preparation. And one of the reasons why I was excited that Victoria wanted to be in this hot seat is that I think a lot of people, if you're a business owner, think about this as your chance to step away from your day-to-day life and to think about, when you're setting your annual plan for next year or your plan for your quarter. It's a very similar process. But if you're an employee, a lot of the time what happens when we prepare for our reviews is we fill out the form they ask us to fill out beforehand. We think vaguely, oh, maybe I should do something to prepare for this. If you're in a year where you feel like you're going to advocate for some kind of raise or title shift or whatever, maybe you do a little bit more preparation. But a lot of us kind of get on that boat pretty passively versus thinking, wow, I got 60 minutes when everyone's focusing on me, and I'm sure that there's things that they probably want to communicate to me, and I'm ready to hear those things, but this is an opportunity for me to get everyone on board with where I want to go, get feedback on that journey, and get help and resources and advice for that journey. So we're going to take Victoria's career goals challenge, which, you know, we literally spent 2 months on that in my program. And we're going to look at this upcoming review and prepping for that review as a kind of mini version of that. Sound good, Victoria?
Yes, sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just wanted to add that, you know, each year a lot of people, they usually are very passive with this task. It's just something to check off on their list of things to do, and they don't think about it. But really, as of late, I've been trying to be more strategic and impactful with these meetings that I have with my supervisor about my career. So thanks again for inviting me.
Yeah. Okay, so the first step of this 20-minute strategy is to create buckets for the thing that you're trying to figure out, right? Or to create either one big bucket or a set of buckets. Now that sounds super big and abstract, so let me ground it a little bit more for you. So let's say that you want to take your business to the next level and you have no clue, like, how do I even get started on doing this, right? So you might create a bucket, right? Take a piece of paper and you might write at the top of it, ideas for taking my business to the next level. And then what you might do is you'll either use a short time period to brainstorm, or you'll use my strategy, you'll use a strategy of saying, okay, over the next week or the next 3 weeks, I'm gonna, you know, keep this on my wall or keep this next to my desk, maybe keep a stack of Post-its next to me. And as soon as I have a thought about an idea to take my business to the next level, I'm gonna write it down and I'm gonna stick it in the bucket that I've created for it. The other thing you can do is you might know that there are sub-buckets, right? So for Victoria, like you might know right here, right now, you know, when I write a blog post, it's like, well, you know, this can sound boring, but it's usually like an introduction, framing a problem. It's 3 either tips or examples that you can learn from, and it's some kind of conclusion. It's like 5 buckets, right? And so I might say, okay, tips, like tips that you can learn from, or stories of women I've worked with, and I'll just collect those. For Victoria, as she prepares for her performance review, there's probably a couple of buckets of things that she might want to collect. So, you know, and I'll throw some out there. Actually, Victoria, anything that kind of comes to mind?
Well, I know that in our CDPR, our review process, they kind of split things up into like our goals into different types of goals. One being like business goals, another being career goals. Would that be a good example?
I love it. I love it. I love it. So yeah, the structure of your company, or, you know, if you're doing an annual review for yourself, you can borrow someone else's bucket. So that's helpful. So for you right now, if you're working on a specific problem, if you have one big bucket, take a minute and just write it down on a piece of paper and just like you've created something to collect it. For Victoria, I actually think I want to kind of dive deep into that, which is oftentimes in your review, you want to talk about what you've done. So that's your accomplishments. You want to talk about what you, like what your goals are, right? What you see yourself achieving either in the long term or in the short term. You know, sometimes those long-term goals, you can just break them up into short term. And then you also want to talk about what you're going to need, right? What resources, opportunities. You know, sometimes if you do want something like a title shift, sometimes you can advocate for a title shift because it helps you achieve something else, right? You know, I want to be, you know, I'd like to be the go-to person for the project, right? So what resources or opportunities you might need, it might be something like, I'd love to shadow you. I really want to learn more about business development. How can I learn that? Could I shadow you? Could I get some time with the marketing department, et cetera, et cetera? So I put together 3 buckets for Victoria: accomplishments, goals, long-term or short-term, and resources and opportunities that you want to ask for. So Victoria, do these feel right for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, these are great.
Okay. Any other buckets you want to add to the list?
Let me think. Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. So at this stage, you either do the slow burn, right, that we talked about, right, collecting things because your subconscious knows so much, or this is where you actually set a timer and say, okay, I'm literally like dumping out my head and like shaking everything I already know and getting it on the page, because at least that's a start. So we're going to do that. So Victoria, I'm going to give you 2 minutes each to brainstorm with me. If you had, 4 or 5 accomplishments in the last year that were the highest level, what would they be?
Okay. Does it have to be work related?
Yeah, I think so. There's things that will add value to your work.
Right. Well, the example I was going to use is that I graduated from grad school. I got my engineering management degree from Duke. That was my grad school.
You have 1 more minute, so.
Oh goodness. I was a panelist at a innovation civil engineering conference at Columbia. I've been working with the practice technologies group within my company to develop a parametric modeling workflow. And I successfully managed a design build package for the Long Island Railroad third track project that I'm working on.
Yeah, love it. So in 2 minutes, maybe 2.5, Victoria kind of brainstormed the key things, right? The kind of top level points that she might bring up in her accomplishments. And while we don't have time to go into this today, oftentimes what you want to do is to connect those in a performance review, right? This is more about a creative brainstorm, but in a performance review, what you want to do is you want to frame these accomplishments, not just working with practice technology group to develop parametric modeling workflow. You want to frame them as almost like bullet points of like, we did this, we're 50% of the way through this, and here's why it adds value to the firm, right? A panelist at an innovation conference, here's why I see that adding value and ultimately benefiting the firm, right? It's here's how I'm awesome, and here's why this makes us all more awesome. So what you'll do, with your buckets is literally sometimes I really do set like 2-minute timer for myself, and I'll be like, what are all the stories I know on this? That's actually how I create these show agendas. I use this brainstorming technique because otherwise I'll be like, I have to make the perfect show agenda. And, if Victoria were to go through this on her long-term goals, her short-term goals, what resources and opportunities she wanted, in 10 minutes, she could have the basic structure of her performance review. So Victoria, I think we have time to do maybe one more brainstorm. Which one, and then, you can kind of take this with you, but which one would you want to do?
Let's do goals.
Okay. So yeah, off the top of your head, 2 minutes, don't over perfect yourself. You're just brainstorming. You can always add to this later. What are the goals that you have for the next 3, 5, what goals do you have in your career? Go.
Okay. I definitely want to get more finance and contract experience. I would like to become a supervisor. I'd also like to become an associate. Goals. I'd
yeah,
go ahead.
Go for it.
I'd like to manage more design build projects.
All right. Yeah. I mean, there you go. Right. So you have a whole set of things that are on, this is pretty much the bare bones, the basic structure, right? If you printed this out and took it with you, right, that would be the start of a much more proactive career development plan. And what you can do is, you can translate these goals into what resources and opportunities you'd like to have, but you can also use a career development conversation as a time to say, here's what I'd like to do. Here's what I think the path would look like, but what do you think is what do you think I need to do differently? Who should I be working with? Where should I get this knowledge in order to do that, right? Your plan for career development conversation, we basically made, I would say 80% of it in 7 minutes. So a lot of the time, the big open-ended stuff that we're afraid to do, it really takes, it could take you 10 minutes or less in order to get started. What I would suggest Victoria do, because now she basically has a draft, right, is print this out, stick it near her desk, and maybe take a minute to just think for each goal. Is it one that you want to bring into this current conversation? Sometimes we have to limit how many kind of high-level points we bring into each conversation because our listeners only have so much content knowledge that they can grasp at a certain point. So are there ones that you want to prioritize? Is there anything you want to swap out? Right? If you had to have 3 or 4 goals, what would they be? And then can you start to think about the resources or opportunities that you want, and then start a conversation on that? And maybe even, add to this over the course of the week, print it out, and, edit it and create a final version. And then you walk in with like a 1-pager, right? So super, super simple. For those of you who have collected something in a big bucket, the process will look fairly similar, but there's one extra step. So what you want to do is you want to take all the little pieces that you started to collect, and then you want to organize them. You want to say, okay, well, if this was okay, maybe I have some ideas here, which is about the kind of work I want to do, and some ideas here about the kind of, business structure I might want to have. And I have some ideas here about that. And you start to organize them, and then you put them in, you write them into an outline, and then again, you can use the timer strategy to expand on them. So you might say, okay, here are the 3 bullet points in my business structure. I'm going to spend 2 minutes writing 3 sentences about each of these points, and at the end, I'm going to have a draft, right? And part of why you'll hear me talk a lot about numbers in this conversation. I'm a really, really big fan of being like, all right, if my strategy was going to be 5 points, what would those 5 points be, right? It's a way to get past that inner critic that just thinks in this super, super open-ended way and wants you to arrive at perfection immediately. So that's the strategy. And you might even right now have a draft that you can use, that you can either start editing directly, or you can use that timer strategy to start expanding upon. I am happy to take any questions if you want to pop them in the chat box. And I also want to share this little bonus. So for those of you who are at a crossroads in your career where you know that if you had a more clear career direction, you would stop wasting time, you'd work smarter, not harder, because you feel like you knew where you were trying to go, then as I mentioned, I do have a program, a 4-month program for mid-career women in design, creative fields engineering, and the next openings are in September. We actually have only 3 spots left in September, but so first of all, you can sign up for a 30-minute free coaching call where we'll talk about your situation. We'll see whether the program is the right fit for you. And then secondly, I have a special bonus. So the program is going up by about $200 at the end of this month, actually by the end of this week, because I'm going to be going on a creative sabbatical, and more details on that are going to be on my email list. But if you book, if you think that this might be the right program for you, this might be the right next step for you, and if you book your consultation with me today, then we will honor the July price, which is about $200 cheaper. So put that in the chat box, book your session, and I think we're just about finished with the strategy. I hope you were able to make some decisions, make some progress. And, Victoria, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for lending us your situation so that we could see the strategy in action.
Of course, anytime. Thanks for inviting me. It was, it definitely sparked inspiration having that 2 minutes time deadline.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Have a great rest of your day.